Threads of Fate, An American Reckoning. Chapter 1. The Threshold of Freedom. For over 7 years, Victoria Vicky Hayes endured the harsh confines of a women's correctional facility, unjustly serving time for the murder of her con artist husband. Released into a world that had moved on, she found solace and a semblance of community in a dilapidated trailer, sharing it with 2 homeless men while salvaging cardboard and scrap metal to survive. One day, sifting through discarded items, she stumbled upon a forgotten cell phone. When she managed to power it on, what she saw froze the blood in her veins. Dear friends, before we continue, please tell us what corner of the world you're joining us from. Don't forget to hit the like button and enjoy the story. The heavy steel gates clanged shut behind Vicky with a finality that echoed the very hand of fate drawing a thick line. She stood at the threshold of freedom, a crumpled release paper in her hand and 2 $20 bills in the pocket of her faded denim jacket. 7 years, 4 months, and 11 days. That's how long justice had sentenced her for a crime she didn't commit. The April sun beat down, unaccustomedly bright, stinging her eyes. Beyond the barbed wire, the world had continued to spin, oblivious to the shattered lives within. Vicky squinted, trying to quell the tremor in her knees. 42. An age when life truly begins for many. But for her, it was only the ashes of a past and a foggy, uncertain future. The Greyhound bus to Albany rattled along the cracked highway, bouncing over potholes. Her fellow passengers, equally weary-faced ex-convicts, remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Vicky clutched a worn tote bag to her chest, containing her meager belongings, a change of clothes, a small notebook with old addresses, and a photograph of her parents in a homemade cardboard frame. On the train from New York City to Albany, she heard the melodic trill of a cell phone for the first time in years. A young woman in the next seat chatted with a friend about a new iPhone and credit cards. Vicky listened as if to a foreign language. These words belonged to a world from which she had been yanked in distant 1997. Grand Central Station greeted her with its usual hustle and bustle and the aroma of fresh pretzels from the terminal kiosks. New York had changed beyond recognition. Everywhere, gleaming store signs bore trendy names. People dressed brighter and spoke louder. Young men with slicked-back hair paced, speaking rapidly into devices the size of their palms. First stop, the DMV. Vicky spent 2 hours getting there, confused by new street names and unfamiliar subway lines. The queue stretched half a block. People stood with stacks of documents, as if preparing for a bureaucracy exam. Next, barked a woman behind the counter. Without looking up from her papers, Vicky handed over her release papers and temporary ID. License reinstatement, 30 business days. Fee, $40. Proof of address, 2 photos. Next, excuse me, but how do I get proof of address if I don't have a license or a permanent address? The clerk finally looked up, her gaze tired, indifferent, having seen thousands of such petitioners. That's your problem. We don't process without documentation. Next, outside, Vicky sank onto a bench and pulled out the address of her childhood home, Greenwich Village, Clement Street, House 17. Her childhood had been spent there. Memories of her parents lingered there. The brownstone stood, housing her grandmother's cherished collection of Native American blankets. The bus took her to familiar streets. The neighborhood had transformed. Old brownstones had fresh stucco. Expensive foreign cars filled the driveways. Children in bright jackets played in the street. In the windows of the first floor, where her living room used to be, hung sheer curtains with a golden pattern. Vicky pressed the intercom button. A shaky voice answered after a pause. Who's there? Good afternoon, it's Victoria Hayes. I used to live here. Don't know anyone by that name. This has been our house for 5 years, understand? Look, I just got out. Listen, lady, don't give me a hard time. We bought this house legally. Documents are in order. Get lost, or I'll call the cops. The intercom went silent. Vicky stood before the gates of her own home, like a beggar. Through the wrought iron, she saw a manicured courtyard where her mother's lilac bush once grew. Now, it was a children's play area with a plastic slide. By evening, she reached the district attorney's office. The duty DA listened to her half-heartedly. Hayes, Victoria. Case from 98. He scanned his computer screen. Sentence upheld. Appeals denied. Case closed. But I'm innocent. My husband is alive. He set me up. Ms. Hayes, the DA said, rubbing the bridge of his nose wearily. A case can only be reopened with new evidence that could not have been known to the court at the time of sentencing. Do you have such evidence? No, but then without new evidence, the case cannot be reconsidered. Contact legal aid. Maybe they can come up with something. Good day. Leaving the DA's office, Vicky felt like a forgotten piece of litter in a vast, indifferent world. Dusk was falling. She needed a place to sleep, but $40 was pocket change, even for a roadside motel. She returned to her old neighborhood and settled into the stairwell of a neighboring building. The concierge, an elderly woman in a warm bathrobe, initially wanted to chase the vagrant away, but something in Vicky's face stopped her. Where are you from, dearie? From not-so-distant places, Vicky answered honestly. Oh, I see. The woman paused. You can stay one night, but tomorrow, find a shelter. I won't call the police, but you can't stay long. In the morning, the concierge gave her the address of the Angel's Wing shelter and offered her hot tea. Hang in there, honey. God suffered, and so must we. At the shelter, Vicky was warned immediately, 3 days maximum. Then, the spot had to be vacated for others. In those 3 days, she visited dozens of agencies, trying to find work. Everywhere required a driver's license, a social security card, a resume, and all she had was her release paper, a document that repelled employers more effectively than the plague. On the 4th day, she had to look for work on the street. Near a recycling center, people crowded with carts of paper and bags of aluminum cans. Vicky approached 2 men sorting through a pile of cardboard boxes. Mind if I join you? The elder, a lean man in his 50s with intelligent eyes, looked her up and down. Name's Stan. And this here's Lenny. He nodded at a red-haired man in a worn leather jacket. You wouldn't happen to be from one of those places, would you? That's right, Vicky admitted, not hiding it. What were you in for? For killing my husband, whom I didn't kill. Stan looked intently into her eyes, as if reading her entire history. I see. Well, Lenny, should we take our new comrade on board? Lenny, who had been silent until then, unexpectedly spoke in a soft, educated voice. Stan, I think we should. It'll be hard for her alone. All day, they roamed through dumpsters and recycling bins, collecting paper and metal. By evening, they had earned $30 each, enough for bread and milk. Stan led Vicky to an abandoned construction trailer on the outskirts of town. You can crash here for now. It's warm, dry, not much trash. The local sheriff doesn't bother coming out here. It's too much trouble for him. The trailer smelled of old wood and machine oil. In the corner stood a small wood-burning stove. Along the wall, makeshift bunks. Vicky sat on the edge of a cot and suddenly wept, for the first time since her release. Not out of self-pity, but out of gratitude for these simple people who hadn't turned away, who hadn't been afraid of her past. Stan awkwardly patted her shoulder. It's okay, Vicky. I also thought it was over once. Did time for grand theft. Took some lumber from the factory for my cabin. But turns out, life was just starting. The main thing is not to get bitter at the whole world. And Lenny? Lenny, he was a physicist, a PhD. Got into the bottle after his divorce, lost everything. But he's a good man, just needs the right approach. That night, Vicky lay on the hard cot, listening to the rain on the metal roof. The world had met her with indifference, denying her a home, work, even identification. But there were people who extended a hand, expecting nothing in return. Somewhere beyond the window, in this big city, lived the man who had stolen 7 years of her life. He was enjoying the freedom he had taken from her. Vicky clenched her fists. She would find a way to prove her innocence. She would. Chapter 2. The Found Evidence. May crept in unnoticed, wrapping the city in the warmth of new leaves. In the construction trailer, which had become her home, it smelled of warmed wood and fresh air that seeped through cracks in the walls. Vicky woke with the first rays of the sun, a prison habit she couldn't shake after a month of freedom. First, a prayer. She pulled a worn paper icon of St. Nicholas the Wonderworker from her breast pocket, a gift from her cellmate, Faith, before her release. The icon had darkened from frequent touch, its edges frayed, but the saint's face looked out calmly and wisely. Our Father, who art in heaven, Vicky whispered, kneeling before a makeshift iconostasis on a nail box. The words of the prayer flowed naturally, bringing peace to her mourning heart. Behind bars, She had prayed every day, not for a miracle, but for the strength to endure the trial. Now, she asked for the same. Only the trial was called freedom. After prayer, breakfast consisted of leftover bread and tea brewed in a tin mug. Then work. Stan had taught her to read the city like a book, where to find aluminum cans, where to discard cardboard, what time was best to go around office buildings. The main thing is not to be ashamed. He instructed her when they first went out scavenging. You're not stealing, you're cleaning up what people don't need. It's honest work. In a month, Vicky learned to distinguish metal types, determine paper quality, and haggle with recyclers. $30 to $50 a day. Enough for bread, milk, and cereal. Sometimes, she managed to buy a piece of cheese or apples. Lenny proved an unexpected companion. Sober, he was a completely different person, intelligent, delicate, with encyclopedic knowledge. He explained to Vicky how cell phones worked, told her about new technologies that had emerged while she was incarcerated. Imagine, Vicky, now you can shoot video on a phone. The quality is, well, SOSO, but still. In 10 years, everyone will probably walk around with cameras in their pockets. On that May day, they were circling a new office tower on Park Avenue, a glass skyscraper that hadn't existed in '97. Near the service entrance stood recycling bins. Stan rummaged in one, pulling out cardboard boxes. Lenny checked a second. Vicky, look. Lenny called out. Someone threw out a phone here. She approached and saw, among a pile of office paper, a black button phone in a branded leather case. The inscription on the body read Siemens. The phone looked expensive, almost new. Is it working? Vicky asked. Lenny turned the device in his hands, found the power button. The screen remained dark. Battery's dead. But what if we charge it? Stan thought, scratching his head. I remember seeing a charger cord in an old boiler room I sometimes crash in during winter when it's really cold. It seemed like a cell phone charger. We can check if it fits. It's not far, an abandoned boiler room in an old building on the Lower East Side. The electricity is still connected there. The meter isn't sealed. 2 hours later, they sat in the dimly lit boiler room, which smelled of dampness and old coal. Stan quickly found a charger and connected the discovered phone. The phone screen blinked and glowed with a greenish light. All three leaned closer, as if to a fortune teller's crystal ball. It works, Lenny exclaimed happily. Look, there are video recordings here. He clumsily poked at the buttons, studying the unfamiliar menu. Vicky looked at the screen indifferently. What did she care about someone else's videos? But when Lenny played the first file, her heart skipped a beat. A familiar face appeared on the small screen. Michael, her husband, whom she had supposedly killed, alive, smiling, embracing a tall blonde in an expensive fur coat. 2 years of our love, he said, kissing the woman's cheek. Remember how it all started? You were still afraid back then that my wife would suspect something. Vicky clutched the phone with trembling hands. At the bottom of the screen, the date glowed, March 15th, 2004. A month ago, the facade of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, with its recognizable columns, flashed in the frame. Vicky, what's wrong? Stan asked, frightened. She couldn't answer. Her throat was constricted, as if she had swallowed a hot coal. Michael was alive and well, meeting his mistress, celebrating an anniversary, while she had served 6 years for his murder. This is my husband, she whispered. I was in jail for supposedly killing him, and he. Lenny turned pale, sobering up completely. Jesus Christ, so how did he set you up? Vicky wept, unashamed of her tears. He faked his death, disappeared, and I was convicted. I told everyone I was innocent, but no one believed me. Stan silently put his arm around her shoulders. They sat for a minute in silence, listening to water dripping somewhere. This is evidence, Lenny said softly. The date, the location, his face. He's alive, which means there was no murder. But will they believe it in court? Vicky wiped away her tears with the back of her hand. They might say the video is fake. No, Lenny objected, carefully studying the screen. See, there's not only the date, but also geolocation. GPS coordinates, the location of the shoot. In 2004, it was impossible to fake such things. And the quality is too poor for a sophisticated montage. Why would anyone falsify such an amateur video? Vicky looked at the screen again. Michael laughed, telling the blonde some story. The same voice, the same gestures, the same mole near his left ear. Only he looked younger and happier than on their last evening together. You know what? Stan stood up and began pacing the boiler room. This is not a coincidence. This is a sign from above. God does not give a person trials beyond their strength. If he sent you this evidence, it means it's time to restore justice. But how? Vicky felt like a small pebble before a mountain. Who will listen to me? I'm an ex-con, and he's probably already got new documents, a new life. You have to go to the DA's office, Lenny said decisively, with this phone. Let them see the date, the location of the shoot. This is ironclad evidence. Agreed, Stan supported. Just be careful. The phone must be preserved, the video copied, and witnesses to the discovery found. I'm ready to confirm that we found it together in the recycling bin. Me too, Lenny added. Moreover, I can explain the technical side, how date recording works, why the video cannot be backdated. Vicky looked again at the icon of St. Nicholas, which she had held in her hand all this time. The patron saint of the unjustly condemned looked at her from the paper image calmly and encouragingly. Our Father, who art in heaven, she whispered. Thank you for this sign. Give me the strength to see this through. That evening, in the trailer, they watched all the videos on the phone again. Besides the clip at the Waldorf Astoria, there were several other recordings. Michael with the same woman in a restaurant, in an apartment, at a country house. All bore dates from 2003 to 2004. A whole parallel life he had led while she rotted in prison. Are you going to the DA tomorrow? Stan asked. Yes, Vicky answered firmly. Enough hiding in the shadows. It's time to tell everyone the truth. She went to sleep with the phone under her pillow, afraid that it was all a dream. But no, the find was real, the video too. For the first time in 6 years, she had genuine hope. Outside, the trees whispered, and in the distance, the night city hummed. Vicky closed her eyes and mentally thanked God for the strange paths he leads a person to truth. Tomorrow, a new life would begin, a life in which she would fight for her good name. Chapter 3. The Path to Deception. Morning in New York City greeted Vicky with the rumble of subways and the smells of the street. She walked to the district attorney's office, clutching the phone tightly in her hand, the sole proof of her innocence. Each step echoed in her temples. Her heart beat so loudly it seemed passers-by could hear it. The journey took over an hour. She had to save money on transportation. Vicky trudged along familiar streets, involuntarily drifting into the past, into the life when she wasn't an ex-con, but simply Victoria Vicky Hayes from a good, respectable family. Her childhood was spent in that very Greenwich Village brownstone, now occupied by strangers. Her father, Robert Hayes, worked as a bridge engineer for the NYC Department of Transportation. Tall, slightly stooped from constantly poring over blueprints. He came home late, but always found time to talk with his daughter about books, history, and life. Vicky, he'd say, showing her bridge diagrams, see this support? It's the most important part of the structure. If it's strong, the bridge will stand for centuries. But if the foundation is rotten, everything collapses. It's the same in life. You need a strong foundation. Her mother, Eleanor Hayes, taught English literature at Public School 42. Small, elegant, with lively brown eyes, she found beauty in simple things. She read Emerson and Hemingway to Vicky, took her to Broadway shows, and taught her to appreciate true art. A special family pride was their collection of Navajo chiefs blankets, inherited from her great-grandmother, Alexandra Hayes. 15 blankets from the 19th century, each a work of art. Vicky remembered her mother carefully taking them from a cedar chest, spreading them on the table, and telling the story of each pattern. This one is first phase chief's blanket. See how precise the stripes are? And this is second phase, with the added bars. Your great-grandmother came from an old New England family, the Winthrops. She collected these her whole life. Now, it's our heritage, Vicky. Guard it well. Her grandfather, Charles Hayes, acquired the brownstone in 1925 from an old New York family facing financial ruin. He worked at Standard Oil then, earning a good salary. He bought it not for profit, but because he loved the house, and the price was a steal. The former owners were leaving the city lightly, selling everything for next to nothing. Grandpa used to say he bought not a house, but a piece of American history, her mother recalled. Washington Irving once visited here. In the parlor, a young Gershwin played the piano. The walls remember conversations about literature, debates about the future of America. Vicky grew up in an atmosphere of books, music, and family warmth. She studied diligently, was a straight A student in high school, earned a valedictorian medal, and entered the English department at Columbia University without exams. She graduated with honors in 1984. After university, she became an editor at Harmony House Publishers. She loved her job, editing literature textbooks, sometimes writing methodological articles. Colleagues respected her for her professionalism and human qualities, but her personal life didn't flourish. In college, she had romances, but none grew into serious relationships. After 30, meeting someone good became increasingly difficult. Good men were taken. Available ones were often unserious or simply uninteresting. Her parents didn't pressure her, but Vicky saw a quiet sadness in her mother's eyes. Eleanor dreamed of grandchildren, imagining reading them stories, sewing doll clothes. But time passed, and her daughter remained alone. In 1991, her parents died in a car crash on the New York State Thruway. Her father was driving her mother to the hospital. She had suffered a heart attack. A semi-truck rammed their sedan on an icy road. Both died instantly. Vicky buried them in Greenwood Cemetery next to her grandfather. She stood by the fresh graves, feeling like an orphaned child, though she was already 28. The brownstone felt empty. The blanket collection lay in the chest, an unappreciated beauty. It was then, in the summer of 1992, that she met Michael. She was shopping for gifts for colleagues, Native American art, and other souvenirs at a co-op market near Central Park. Times were tough. Paychecks at the publishing house were delayed, and she had to economize. He stood at a craft stall. A man of 34, handsome, well-dressed, picking out wooden carvings, asking the vendor something. Vicky involuntarily listened to their conversation. "I need authentic pieces," he said. "I have partners from Germany. They understand Native American art. Fakes won't do." The vendor shrugged, implying, "It is what it is." Michael sighed in disappointment, about to leave. Vicky approached him, not understanding what compelled her. "Excuse me, I accidentally overheard. Are you looking for authentic American crafts?" He turned, smiled charmingly, openly. "Yes, but it's all tourist traps here." He extended his hand. "Michael Burton. And do you know much about antiques?" Victoria Hayes. "A little. I have a collection of 19th century Navajo blankets at home. An inheritance from my great-grandmother." His eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Navajo blankets? That's every collector's dream. Could I perhaps take a look? You see, I'm just planning to start a company exporting American antiques to Europe. There's huge demand there for authentic pieces." That's how it all began. Michael came to visit a week later with a bouquet of white roses and a box of chocolates. He examined the blankets like an expert, admired the quality of the weaving, and spoke of his plans to create a company exporting American art. Can you imagine, Vicky? In Germany, one such blanket costs thousands of marks, and here, no one appreciates them. It's barbarism. We must show Europe true American beauty. He was charming, educated, and spoke eloquently. He told her about trips abroad, business plans, and his love for American culture. Vicky listened, mesmerized. Into her lonely life burst a man who shared her interests, understood the value of her family heritage. He courted her beautifully, taking her to theaters, restaurants, giving her flowers, speaking of a future together, of how they would develop the business, travel the world, showing people the treasures of American art. "You will be my muse," he whispered, kissing her hands. "Together, we will create an empire of beauty. Your collection, the foundation, and my business acumen will help bring it to the world." Vicky believed every word. After loneliness and loss, his attention seemed like a gift from fate. She fell in love not only with him, but also with the future he painted, where her blankets would become the pride of American art abroad. Only now, after years of prison and humiliation, did she understand how skillfully he spun his web. Every compliment, every promise, was calculated to lull her into a false sense of security. From the very beginning, he was hunting not for a woman, but for the collection, for the brownstone, for her entire family heritage. Vicky stopped before the DA's office building and took a deep breath. In her pocket, the phone with evidence of his lies felt like a burning ember. It was time to tell the truth about this man, who could pretend so skillfully that even the court believed in his death. "Well, Victoria Hayes," she whispered to herself. Time to gather the stones. Chapter 4. A Web of Lies. As she ascended the steps of the district attorney's office, Vicky continued to unearth the past, as if counting the beads of a rosary of pain. Each memory resonated with a dull ache in her heart, but she forced herself to remember. She needed to understand exactly where her path to disaster began. After meeting at the market, Michael became an increasingly frequent presence in her life. He called every day, invited her to the theater, to new restaurants opening all over New York then. The National, the Grand Central Oyster Bar, even the famous 21 Club on West 52nd Street, where dinner cost his monthly salary. Money should work, he would say, ordering expensive wine. I'm in a good phase right now. Partners from Hamburg have transferred in advance for the first shipment. Soon, we'll be millionaires, Vicky. His confidence was captivating. In those wild 90s, many made fortunes from nothing, trading everything, traveling abroad with suitcases full of goods. Why couldn't American antiques become a gold mine? They married in January 1993, a modest ceremony with friends. Michael insisted she keep her maiden name. You see, Vicky, for European business, family history is important. Hayes, that's practically an old American lineage. Burton sounds too common. Clients need to feel the aristocracy. The logic seemed convincing. Vicky agreed, unaware that she was handing the predator the keys to her family's vault. After the wedding, they settled in the brownstone. Michael enthusiastically explored every room, inquiring about the history of each item. He was especially drawn to the property deeds and the collection documents. He spent hours with folders, studying certificates of origin for the blankets, expert appraisals. Everything needs to be properly documented, he explained. For export, we need certificates of cultural value, permits from the Department of Cultural Affairs, a sea of bureaucracy, but there's no getting around it. The first 2 years of their marriage were blissful. Michael surrounded her with care, gave her gifts, made plans, spoke of negotiations with German collectors, showed her letters from potential buyers. Everything looked serious and promising. The only thing marring their happiness was the inability to have children. Doctors shrugged. Both their analyses were perfect, no pathologies, yet pregnancy wouldn't occur. Michael consoled her, suggesting they not rush. Maybe it's for the best, he'd say. First, let's get the business on its feet, then we'll focus on family. Children require full dedication, and we're in a critical period right now. He even bought her vitamins, expensive imported pills for women's health. Vicky dutifully took them, hoping her body would strengthen and give them an heir. Only years later, in the prison infirmary, did she learn the terrible truth from a gynecologist. The symptoms she had experienced during her marriage were characteristic of regular contraceptive use. Michael had been slipping her hormones to prevent pregnancy. He didn't want children, only her assets. The first suspicions crept in during 1995. Michael started coming home late frequently, citing business meetings. He'd arrive late, smelling of strange perfume, speaking on the phone in whispers, quickly hanging up when she appeared. Work, Vicky, he'd wave her off. Negotiations with new partners. They're serious people. Confidentiality is paramount. But a woman's heart sensed the lie. Vicky began to watch, to listen. She found restaurant receipts for two in his jacket pockets, notes with women's names, chewing gum with an unfamiliar lipstick taste. The business, too, was stagnating. Promised shipments were constantly delayed. The German partners suddenly became unreachable. Letters stopped coming. To her questions, Michael replied evasively. Crisis in Europe, purchasing power has fallen, but it's temporary. Everything will stabilize soon. In 1997, Vicky accidentally saw an SMS on his new cell phone. Michael had left the phone on the kitchen table and gone to shower. The screen glowed with an incoming message from a certain Lika. Mike, darling, when will we finally get rid of this problem? Tired of hiding. Vicky scrolled through the messages with trembling hands. What she read turned her world upside down. The plan will work. The old woman will disappear soon, Michael had written. Everything is ready, just waiting for the right moment. And the money, will it definitely be there? Lika asked. The house alone is worth $500,000. Plus the collection. We'll live like royalty, baby. When will you act? Soon. Patience, my dear. Vicky barely finished reading. Her hands shook so violently the phone almost fell. So, all this time, He had been planning her murder. All those years of love, care, joint plans, it was all a lie. She put the phone back and ran out of the house. For several hours, she wandered through New York, trying to comprehend what she had read. Inside, everything felt broken, like a taut string snapping. She returned late, when Michael was already asleep. She lay beside him and stared at the ceiling all night, listening to his breathing. In the morning, at breakfast, he was his usual self, smiling, caring. "Vicky, you look pale. Are you sick?" "No, just slept badly." "Maybe you should see a doctor? Or we could go on vacation. I'm looking at a package to Hawaii." She nodded, kept up the conversation, but inside, everything had turned cold. This man was planning her death and could calmly discuss a vacation. Vicky decided to file for divorce. Secretly, she went to a lawyer, started preparing the documents, but she didn't get to finish. Michael outmaneuvered her. The fateful evening occurred at the end of October. Michael came home with a bouquet of roses and a bottle of French champagne. "We're celebrating, Vicky." The Germans finally agreed to the first shipment. "The contract is signed. The money will be here in a week." He was unusually cheerful, embracing her, spinning her around the room, opening the champagne, pouring it into glasses. "To us, my dear, to our happy future." Vicky raised her glass, but didn't drink. Something in his eyes was unsettling, too bright a gleam, too wide a smile. "Mike, show me the contract. I'm curious." "Tomorrow." It stayed at the office. "For now, let's just celebrate." He drank his glass in one gulp, urged her to drink. Vicky sipped the champagne and tasted a strange, bitter, metallic flavor. Discreetly, she poured the wine into a potted plant. "Mike, I'm just going to the restroom." "Of course, darling." In the bathroom, she forced herself to vomit, then rinsed her mouth thoroughly. Her heart pounded. The moment had come. Tonight, he would try to kill her. She returned to the living room. Michael stood by the window, talking on the phone. "Yes, everything according to plan." "In half an hour?" "No, she suspects nothing." Seeing her, he quickly hung up. Partners called, clarifying contract details. Vicky sat in an armchair, pretending to feel dizzy. "I feel a bit unwell. Maybe it's the champagne." "Lie down, darling, it'll pass." She closed her eyes, pretending to lose consciousness. Michael approached, leaned over her. Something sharp gleamed in his hand, a kitchen knife. "Goodbye, Vicky," he whispered. "Nothing personal." At the last moment, Vicky sharply recoiled. The knife slashed her arm, leaving a deep scratch. Michael stumbled, fell. Vicky ran out of the house and to the neighbors. What followed was like a nightmare. Police, detectives, witnesses. Neighbors testified they saw Vicky running out of the house with a bloody arm. Inside, they found the knife with her fingerprints and traces of blood, but Michael was gone. His mother, Eleanor Burton, crying, told detectives that her son had called her, complaining about his wife's aggressive behavior. Witnesses appeared who allegedly heard their arguments. A crime scene investigator found signs of a struggle in the house, but Michael himself was not found. A month later, a mutilated, undocumented male corpse was pulled from the East River. Forensics suggested it could be Michael Burton. Only now did Vicky understand how thoroughly this operation had been planned. The body was likely obtained from a morgue, and witnesses were paid for false testimonies. In the wild 90s, bribing a detective or an expert was a matter of course. And she, trusting and naive, fell into this trap like a moth to a flame. Michael had studied her psychology. He knew she was incapable of cruelty, that she would believe in love and be deceived. An ideal victim for a perfectly planned crime. Vicky stopped before the entrance to the district attorney's office. In her pocket, the phone with evidence of his deception felt like a hot ember. It was time to begin the fight for justice, a fight that could be the last of her life. Chapter 5. The System's Imperfection. The corridors of the district attorney's office smelled of government-issue paint and stale paper. Vicky sat on a hard bench, clutching the precious phone in her hands, awaiting her appointment. Her heart pounded so loudly it seemed everyone passing by could hear it. "Hayes, Victoria," a weary voice called out. "Come in." A man in his 50s with graying temples and attentive gray eyes sat behind a desk. His name tag read, Sergeant David Miller, Senior Detective. "Have a seat." He gestured to the chair opposite. "The duty prosecutor passed on your request. Case from '98, alleged murder of your husband. I'll tell you up front, We can only review closed cases with new evidence. Vicky took out the phone and placed it on the table. I have evidence. A video recording made this March. It shows my husband, whom I supposedly killed 7 years ago. Detective Miller grunted skeptically. Ms. Hayes, I understand your desire to clear your name, but the court isn't a game. How many attempts have there been to appeal the verdict using various documents? Just look, Vicky said firmly. Just look. Miller reluctantly picked up the phone, played the video. Michael's face appeared on the screen, alive, smiling, embracing the blonde at the entrance to the Waldorf Astoria. The detective frowned, rewatched the recording, carefully examining the date. Where did you get this? I found it in a recycling bin. I have witnesses to the discovery. 2 men who helped me collect cardboard. Detective Miller leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. In his eyes, skepticism was replaced by professional interest. That's not enough. The video could be manipulated, the date faked. Then conduct an expert analysis, Vicky pressed. I'm ready for any checks. Miller was silent for a long time, studying her face. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, Tell me about your husband. What was his name? Where did he work? What did he wear? Vicky described Michael in detail. His habits, his manner of speaking, the mole near his left ear, the scar on his palm from a childhood injury. Miller listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. You know, he finally said, either you're a brilliant actress or you're telling the truth. And in 30 years on the job, I've learned to tell the difference. He stood up, walked to the window. Beyond the glass, gray rooftops and a vacant lot where children played baseball were visible. I also have a story of injustice, he said quietly. My wife died in '98 from appendicitis. A simple appendicitis, you understand? At the county hospital, they said, 2-week waiting list for surgery. A private clinic was ready to do it immediately, but for $10,000. He paused, looking at the playing children. We didn't have that kind of money. I'm a detective, not a businessman. We thought 2 weeks wouldn't be critical. We were wrong. Peritonitis developed in 4 days. Vicky felt her throat tighten. My daughter still blames me, Miller continued. She says, your job was more important than family. You could have taken a bribe like others, saved Mom. And she's right, in a way. The system is imperfect, and honesty sometimes kills. He turned to Vicky. I will review your case. If I find any procedural errors in the original investigation, I will submit a report to the DA requesting a review. But be warned, the process is long, a lot of bureaucracy. The next 2 weeks dragged on agonizingly. Vicky went to the DA's office every day, but Miller was busy. Finally, he called her in again. The report has been submitted, he announced without preamble. The DA has approved a review. Here's the order. Vicky took the official document with trembling hands. What does this mean? It means we have a month to find new evidence of your innocence or confirm the correctness of the old verdict. What have you found already? Miller pulled out a thick folder. Your case is a textbook example of '90s shoddy work. The investigation was sloppy. Forensics were superficial. Witness testimonies were contradictory. Some were clearly fabricated. He opened the folder, showed her photos. Here, for example, the blood analysis on the knife. The conclusion was made 2 days after the evidence was seized. According to the technology of those years, it required a minimum of a week. Someone was in a great hurry. So, the analysis is most likely fake. But proving it is difficult. The expert died 3 years ago of a heart attack. Miller turned a few more pages. The witnesses are also interesting. Miss Peterson, who allegedly heard your arguments with your husband, moved to Canada immediately after the trial. Mr. Jenkins, who claimed to see you running out of the house with a knife, turned out to be a longtime drug addict. His testimony, in principle, couldn't have been taken into account. And the detective who handled the case, Lieutenant Smith, resigned in 2001 of his own accord. They say he was caught taking bribes, but the case was hushed up. He now works as a security guard at a supermarket. Vicky listened, hardly believing it. It seemed the entire system had worked against her, from the precinct officer to the prosecutor. But how was this possible? Were they all bribed? Not all. Miller shook his head. It's just that in those years, many worked sloppily. Crime clearance rates were more important than truth. If there's a body and a suspect, the case can be closed. He closed the folder. Now for the hardest part, finding your living husband. I've already assigned it to the task force. We're checking databases nationwide. A week later, The results came in. Detective Sergeant Rodriguez from the Fugitive Task Force spread printouts on the table. "We have information," he said. "A certain Michael S. Cooper is wanted for fraud in Miami and Las Vegas. Physical descriptions match your husband's." Vicky looked at the photograph. Even in poor quality, it was clearly Michael, older, with a beard, but definitely him. "The scheme is the same," the sergeant continued. "He meets single women, gains their trust, gets access to their assets. In Miami, he swindled a military widow out of $200,000. In Las Vegas, he fraudulently transferred an elderly teacher's condo into his name, then vanished. And where is he now? We've located him. He's living in a suburb of Los Angeles, in Pasadena, with a woman named Alice M. Sterling, a widow, 50 years old. Her husband was a vice president at a tech company. House, car, savings, everything he likes." Miller carefully studied the documents. "Under what name is he living?" "Burton. His ID, by all accounts, is fake." "Understood. So he never fully changed his legend." The detective pondered. "We need to approach him carefully. If we spook him, he'll disappear again, and he'll be hard to find. What do you suggest?" "Surveillance. We'll gather evidence of his current activities, then catch him red-handed. Simultaneously, we'll get an official expert analysis of the video recording. We need to officially confirm that it's not a fake." Vicky sat and listened as two professionals planned an operation to capture the man who had destroyed her life. For the first time in years, she felt that justice was possible. "How long will this take?" 2 or 3 months, Miller replied. "We can't rush. Everything must be done legally, so there are no claims later." "What if he escapes?" "He won't escape. He considers himself invulnerable. Victoria Hayes is in prison. The case is closed. He can live peacefully. Such criminals rarely change tactics. Why should they, if the old one works?" That evening, Vicky walked back to her trailer, thinking about the strange twists of fate. A month ago, she was nobody, an ex-con without documents or means of survival. Now, the state machine had begun to work in her favor. But most importantly, she had met a man who believed her. David Miller had also suffered from the imperfection of the system, losing his wife due to bureaucracy and indifference. Perhaps that's why he saw in her story a reflection of his own pain. At the trailer, Stan and Lenny were waiting for her with dinner, potatoes, and canned stew. "Well, how were things at the DA's office?" Stan asked. "They've started an investigation. The detective turned out to be a good man." "That's great." Lenny smiled. "So, the truth will prevail after all." "Truth prevails slowly," Vicky corrected. "But surely." She took out the icon of St. Nicholas and quietly thanked God for the help sent. The path to truth had been long and winding, but she no longer doubted she would see it through to the end. Chapter 6. Unmasking the Deceiver. August stretched out like a slow river of anticipation. 3 months of meticulous preparation transformed Vicky's life into a series of meetings with officers, reviewing case files, and endless procedures. Detective Miller worked methodically, leaving no detail unchecked. "We can't rush," he repeated when Vicky grew anxious. "One mistake, and it's all for nothing. He'll get a good lawyer, and the case will fall apart in court." First, they obtained a court order for a wiretap on Michael's phone. The judge, an elderly woman with tired eyes, studied the materials for a long time. "There is sufficient probable cause," she finally said. "I authorize a wiretap for 2 months, but remember, any procedural violation and the evidence won't be admissible in court." The task force set up the equipment. Detective Rodriguez regularly reported the results. "An interesting picture is emerging," he said, showing printouts of conversations. "Your ex-husband hasn't changed. He's gaining Alice Sterling's trust, planning to transfer her condo into his name." Vicky read the transcripts with a painful sense of déjà vu. The same intonations, the same tactics he had once used on her. "Alice, darling, you understand, I need guarantees," Michael said in a recording from August 15th. "I'm investing my last money in the business, and if something happens to you, I'll be left with nothing." "Mike, but a will, it sounds so morbid," the woman replied. "Nonsense, it's just a formality. You're healthy young, but I'll be at peace about our future." "Classic real estate fraud," Miller commented. "Pity the woman. She probably thinks she's found love in her golden years." In late August, Michael decided on a decisive step. An intercepted conversation with a certain Pete revealed he intended to falsify Alice Sterling's will. The document will be indistinguishable from the original, Pete assured him. The paper's right, the seal's authentic. Just find a pliable notary. And if they refuse to notarize, find another one. They'll agree for that kind of money. The operation was scheduled for September 3rd. Michael arrived at a notary public's office in Beverly Hills with the forged will and a thick wad of cash. Officers waited in a neighboring building. The notary, Ms. Evelyn J. Thompson, turned out to be a woman of principle. She carefully examined the document, comparing it with signature samples. "Young man," she said sternly, "this forgery is quite clumsy, by the way." "What? Do you think I've never seen a forged will before?" Michael paled, tried to persuade her. "Miss Thompson, maybe you're mistaken? Look again. I'm calling the police." The notary cut him off. At that moment, the officers entered the office. Michael S. Cooper, also known as Burton, also known as Klimov, Detective Rodriguez announced, "You are under arrest on suspicion of fraud." Michael bolted for the exit, but the path was blocked by a second officer. He didn't resist, apparently realizing the futility. "By what right?" he asked, trying to maintain his dignity. "I have a lawyer." "You can call from the station," Rodriguez replied indifferently, putting handcuffs on him. A search of the Pasadena apartment yielded sensational results. In a hidden compartment behind a false panel, they found 12 Navajo Chiefs blankets from Vicky's collection. They lay in a cedar chest, wrapped in silk cloth, exactly as her mother had stored them. "So he didn't sell them," Miller said, surprised. "He kept them, like a nest egg for a rainy day." Vicky held the first phase Chief's blanket, the very one her mother had shown her in childhood. The fabric still carried the scent of cedar and lavender that her grandmother had used to interleave the shawls. "He still loved beautiful things," she said quietly. "Perhaps, deep down, he understood their value, or he was just greedy," Detective Rodriguez countered. "He probably thought he could sell them profitably someday." The confrontation was scheduled for a week later. Vicky prepared for the meeting like an exam. Karen, her friend, a theater costume designer, helped her get ready. "Vicky, you must look dignified," she said, styling her hair. "Let that scoundrel see that he didn't break you." Karen lent her a nice suit, shoes, even helped choose lipstick. Vicky looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. For the first time in years, she looked like the old Victoria Hayes, not an ex-con. The interrogation room was small and stuffy. Michael sat at the table accompanied by his lawyer, a young man with a self-assured air. Seeing Vicky, he turned pale and averted his eyes, as if he'd seen a ghost. "Do you recognize this person?" Miller asked. "Yes," Vicky answered firmly. "This is my ex-husband, Michael Cooper, who took the name Burton after our wedding." "My client is not obliged to answer," the lawyer intervened. "Let him answer," Michael unexpectedly said. Enough silence. He lifted his head, looked Vicky in the eyes. In his gaze, there was weariness and a kind of hopelessness. "Yes, it's me, Michael Cooper. I faked my own death in 1997. The lawyer flinched, tried to stop his client, but Michael waved him off. "Why did you do it?" Miller asked. Michael paused, choosing his words. "You wouldn't understand. You're one of those born with a silver spoon in your mouth." He looked at Vicky bitterly. A brownstone in downtown New York. An antique collection, an education. And me? A cramped apartment, a janitor mother, never knew my father. "You rich people think we owe you a lifetime of servitude. But why did you set me up?" Vicky asked. "What else could I do?" Michael spoke faster, as if a dam had broken. "Just divorce and be left with nothing? I worked for you for 5 years, pretended to be a loving husband. Consider it payment for my service. And the collection? Why did you steal it?" "Didn't steal it. I took what was deserved," he flared up. "Do you think it was easy enduring your intellectual arrogance?" "Mike, that's 15th century. Be careful." "Mike, that's a museum piece. I always felt like a savage in your house." Vicky listened, astonished. Apparently, he saw her care for cultural heritage as arrogance, and her desire to preserve beauty as contempt for ordinary people. "Did your mother also participate in the scheme?" Miller asked. Michael slumped. "Mom, she thought she was helping me get established in life. She used old community connections, made arrangements with the detective. I told her that my wife wanted to divorce and take all my assets." "Did she know you were alive?" "No. That is, in general terms, she thought I was just hiding from a divorce. My mom's a simple woman. She doesn't understand legal subtleties. Eleanor Burton was brought in an hour later. The 70-year-old woman in a faded coat cried incessantly. My Michael, my son, what have you done? She wailed. I tried to help you. I wanted you to live a decent life. Did you know your son faked his own death? The detective asked. No, Eleanor sobbed. He said his wife was mistreating him, wanted to throw him out of the house. I thought, divorces were complicated back then, property division. I talked to Detective Smith to help my son. And what was Detective Smith supposed to do? I don't know. Michael said to arrange everything properly so the house would remain with him. I thought it was legal. Detective Miller looked at the crying old woman with pity. Blind maternal love had driven her to complicity in a crime. Eleanor Burton, do you understand that because of your actions, an innocent woman spent 7 years in prison? The old woman looked at Vicky with frightened eyes. Forgive me, she whispered. I didn't mean to. I thought Michael was right. Vicky unexpectedly felt not anger, but pity for this woman. Eleanor Burton had tried to protect her only son in the only way available to her, through old connections from her past life. Both were arrested that same day. Michael walked to the squad car calmly, as if relieved that the secret was out. His mother sobbed, repeating, I only did it for you, son. For you. That evening, Detective Miller walked Vicky to the bus stop. They walked in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Thank you, she finally said. Without you, I would never have achieved justice. It's my job, he replied simply. Though not just my job. It was also important for me to prove that the system can work honestly. They stopped at the bus stop. Evening New York hummed around them. Cars, people, life. So what happens now? Vicky asked. Court. Exoneration, restitution of property. It'll be a long process, but we'll see it through. I meant us. Detective Miller smiled, for the first time in all the months they'd known each other. And what about us? My daughter thinks you're a gold digger. Says, another woman trying to trap Dad. And what do you tell her? That not every woman who appears in my life is an adventuress. Sometimes, it's just a good person who's fallen on hard times. The bus arrived. Vicky sat by the window and waved to him. Ahead lay the court, the restoration of her rights, the return to a normal life. But most importantly, justice had finally prevailed. And in her life, there was now a man who had believed her when no one else did. Perhaps this too was a form of justice, belated but no less important. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. The winter trial proceeded without surprises. Michael received 8 years in a state penitentiary for fraud and falsification of evidence. His mother, Eleanor Burton, was sentenced to 3 years probation, taking into account her age and remorse. The old woman wept in the courtroom, repeatedly saying, Forgive me, Vicky, forgive this old fool. Vicky approached her after the verdict. I hold no grudge, she said quietly. You loved your son. That's not a crime. The rehabilitation process stretched on for 1.5 years. The bureaucratic machine worked slowly. Every certificate required trips to various agencies. Only by autumn 2005 was Vicky officially exonerated, granted the right to restitution of property and compensation. The brownstone greeted her with emptiness. Over years of absentee ownership, the house had deteriorated. The roof leaked, plaster peeled, and wiring and plumbing needed replacement. The tech executive's family moved out without a fuss, even apologizing for the inconvenience. The collection was partially recovered. 12 blankets were found with Michael, another surfaced at an auction. She had to buy it back for a significant sum. 2 were never found. Money for renovations came from a rare blanket from the 1840s with a Frontier Dreams pattern. Experts valued it at $30,000. The antique market was experiencing an upswing. Collectors hunted for authentic rarities. It's hard to part with it, Vicky confessed to the appraiser. But the house is more important. The blankets deserve to live in a beautiful place. The renovation was extensive. She decided to convert the basement into a textile restoration workshop, a business she was passionate about and which could generate income. Stan and Lenny became her first assistants. Vicky offered them accommodation in the house, in a cozy attic apartment converted from a former storage room. Vicky, we're just regular guys, Stan demurred. It's not right for us to live in a house like this. Nonsense, she waved him off. The house is big. There's enough room for everyone. And I need help. Who else understands old things so thoroughly? Lenny had finally quit drinking, reinstated his documents, and officially became the workshop manager. It turned out his organizational skills and technical literacy were very useful. Her relationship with David Miller developed slowly, maturely. They met, went to plays, talked about books and work. His daughter, Catherine, initially met Vicky with coolness. "Dad, did that woman come over again?" the 17-year-old asked. "Doesn't she have enough money? Is she latching onto you?" "Katie, don't be silly." Her father gently rebuked her. "Victoria Hayes is a good person." "Yeah, good," the girl snorted. "I know all about good ones." But gradually, the ice melted. Vicky didn't impose herself, didn't try to replace her mother, simply was there when help with homework or female advice was needed. They married in the summer of 2006. A modest ceremony at City Hall with close friends. Katie came in a white dress and, for the first time, smiled at Vicky without reservation. "Dad's happy," she said after the ceremony. "I haven't seen him like this in a long time." They decided to live in the brownstone. David's apartment was too small for the large family they planned to create. A month after the wedding, Vicky met Daria. She had come to the McNeil Children's Home on business, restoring antique flags for the home's museum. The 5-year-old girl sat in a corner of the reading room, looking at a picture book. "Pretty blankets," she said, seeing photos of Navajo pieces in an album. "Do you like them?" Vicky knelt beside her. "Uh-huh, but I don't have any. I don't have anything at all." Vicky's heart ached. Daria limped, a consequence of a car accident that killed her parents. Doctors said the limp was correctable, but it required surgery and long-term physical therapy. "Would you like me to give you a blanket?" Vicky offered. "Really? Can you?" "Of course. But first, we need to talk to Aunt Carol." The adoption was finalized by winter. The leg surgery was performed at the best clinic in New York, partially funded by the state, partially by their own money. Rehabilitation took 6 months, but the result exceeded expectations. Daria began to walk normally, with only a slight limp when tired. The workshop was gaining momentum. The first orders came from the Museum of Natural History. They needed to restore a collection of 15th-century Native American ceremonial robes. Vicky worked with meticulous precision, restoring threads and colors, returning the fabrics to their original appearance. By the end of 2006, they could pay decent salaries to employees. Stan became the senior woodworking master, making frames for paintings and stretchers for restored textiles. Lenny managed the operations, negotiated with clients, and prepared estimates. In early 2007, Vicky realized she was pregnant. At 43, it was a late pregnancy, but with modern medical care, it was quite safe. The Family Planning Center offered full monitoring. "There are risks," the doctor honestly warned, "but modern technologies allow us to minimize them. We will monitor you every 2 weeks." David glowed with happiness. "A son," he said, stroking Vicky's belly. "Definitely a son. We'll name him Robert, after your father." The pregnancy was not easy, but proceeded without critical complications. Robert was born in July 2007. A healthy, robust boy weighing 7 pounds, 1 ounce. "A little charmer," Stan cooed, cradling the baby in his arms. The spitting image of Grandpa Robert Hayes, judging by the portrait. Katie, who was 20 by then, was thrilled with her little brother. "Mom, can I invite my friends over to see my brother? The girls will be so jealous." The word "mom" sounded natural, unforced. Vicky realized that her family had finally come together, not quickly, but solidly. The summer of 2009 was exceptionally warm. In the brownstone's garden, under the old apple tree, children played. 10-year-old Daria built a sandcastle, while 2-year-old Robert diligently demolished it. The girl patiently explained to her brother that castles should be cherished, not destroyed. "Robert, no? It's pretty." Vicky watched the children from the window of her workshop, where she was working on restoring a particularly valuable exhibit, an 1860s blanket from the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection. The work required extreme precision. Every thread counted. "Aunt Vicky, can I come in?" "Come in, sweetie. Just wash your hands." The girl watched, fascinated, as Vicky's delicate fingers straightened ancient threads, restoring the fabric to its original beauty. "Will you teach me to do that?" "Absolutely, when you're a little older." On the workshop wall hung portraits of Vicky's parents in beautiful frames made by Stan. Nearby were photos of her new family, her wedding to David, Robert's first steps, Katie's graduation, Daria's birthday. Voices drifted up from the basement. Stan explained the intricacies of wood carving to Lenny. Both now lived in a separate apartment in the attic, worked in the workshop, and felt like full members of the family. In the evening, when the children were asleep, Vicky went out into the garden. David sat on a bench under the apple tree, reading a newspaper. "How's the workshop?" he asked, embracing his wife. "Good. Lots of orders. The Met wants 2 more blankets restored. Soon, I'll have to hire an assistant. And the kids? Katie graduates next month. She wants to go into law enforcement, following in her dad's footsteps. Daria is growing up so smart, loves to draw. Robert is simply our joy." They sat in silence, listening to the rustle of leaves and the distant sounds of evening New York. Warm light glowed in the windows of the house, illuminating family photos and the restored blanket collection. "You know," Vicky said quietly, "sometimes I think, what if this is all a dream? Too good to be true." "Not a dream," David smiled. "Just justice. Belated, but justice. The Lord took, but he repaid manifold," Vicky whispered, remembering her mother's words. "The main thing is not to lose faith in people and justice." Somewhere in the nursery, Robert cried. Vicky got up to comfort her son. Life continued. A simple, happy life she had earned through years of suffering and patience. In the workshop, the unfinished blanket lay on the table, awaiting tomorrow's work. Ancient beauty, having survived centuries, was once again finding life in caring hands. Just like Vicky herself, who had endured pain and betrayal, but retained the ability to love and bring joy to others. The circle was complete. The family home once again became a home to family. Dear friends, did you enjoy the story Threads of Fate, An American Reckoning? What do you think about Michael's actions and Vicky's resilience? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if the story touched your heart. Share it with your friends and subscribe to our channel. In the description, you'll find a playlist of all our stories. We wish you good health and a wonderful mood.